Alright, let's talk about some more music. Let's do it. Starting it off with Cigarettes After Sex's self-titled album here. This is just a completely bland and forgettable kind of dollar store version of Slowdive. Smino's Love for Rent is a playful and beautiful album helmed by the versatile and eccentric vocals by Smino. I've been getting more into this kind of underground hip-hop scene with the Alchemist, kind of the Griselda gang, I guess you could say. And this one has kind of disappointed me a little bit, mainly due to the lack of chemistry between Boldy James and the Alchemist. Boldy just doesn't really find pockets that work on a lot of these beats for me. Individually, the Alchemist and Boldy are solid, but they don't really complement each other that well on this record. This one took me a while to collect my thoughts on, but I feel like I'm finally at the point where I kind of get the appeal of this album. The songs on this thing seem simple, but they're deceptively complex. There's a lot of great organ parts. Overall, it's charming, theatrical, and pretty playful at times. This is just an excellently produced and performed indie pop classic. Morrissey's vocals here really steal the show. There's something really unique, smooth, and calming about the timbre of his voice. And for the majority of the album, the band does a great job of giving him enough room to shine. My only gripe with this album is that the songs can tend to feel a little bit formulaic and predictable. But overall, this thing is pretty great. Man, this album is it's a tough listen. It's like taking a knife to the heart. The storytelling on this thing is unfiltered and raw, and it really results in a deeply personable and relatable album as well. I can't help but admire Mark's commitment to telling all the details of these stories on this album. Sometimes the details might not seem important, but it really creates this feeling that feels really personal and just really realistic. Overall, it's a pretty heavy listen, but it's a great portrayal of just kind of the human experience, and it's really touching at times, really heartbreaking at times, and just a very special listen. I recently just listened to Boy Genius's debut earlier this year, so I was pretty hyped for this record, but I feel like the potential shown on that record isn't really followed up on here. A lot of these tracks just feel underdeveloped and bland, so a pretty disappointing record overall for me. Speaking of disappointing, this is a pretty cringe album. It's just filled with kind of corporate edginess, extremely tacky production choices, and kind of a lack of cohesion as well. Overall, it's pretty basic and bland, and it's just not great. Don't listen to it. I mean, unless you want to have a painful experience, go ahead. With this album, it kind of seems like Smino was yet to find the production that he really works well on top of. He's still really versatile and eccentric here, but he doesn't really match the production that well. He obviously went on to kind of perfect his sound and further develop it on Love for Rent, but this one just isn't nearly as polished. Man, these songs just translate to a live setting so well. This live version of this album feels even more lonely and kind of ponderous due to the beautiful natural reverb that you're getting on a lot of these tracks. The added string arrangements are a nice surprise as well. It might not feel as intimate as the studio recordings, but I do love the fact that it feels kind of like a unique experience, even though a lot of these songs are obviously previously existing songs. Despite a strong start, The House is Burning falls victim to some sleepy vocal performances from Isaiah Rashad and some features that usually outperform him. Right from the first second, this album just completely transports me into another world with its lively horns, shuffling rhythm sections, trance-inducing time signatures, and the expressive playing of Sanders, which is very unique. This album never lets up on the musicianship. And another Pharoah Sanders album here. This one's I don't like as much, but it's still pretty impressive. Really, the emotion and almost human-like qualities of Sanders' playing really stands out on this one. He's just got such a unique way of playing. It's kind of insane. This is a fittingly doubtful and pessimistic look into a failing relationship, and it's brought to life by Fiona Apple's blunt and honest writing. With its theatrical vocals and its interesting fusion of folk and psychedelia, this album from Grizzly Bear shows that they were definitely one of the more interesting bands from the kind of indie explosion of the 2000s. The fireworks and flash of this project is ultimately hindered by some grating production choices and an overall lack of care when it comes to creating nuanced instrumentals. Yeah, everything about this album is gross. The cover is just straight up nightmare inducing and also just kind of a ripoff of Bjork. The music is kind of stiff, unflattering, and basic pop that is trying to pose as something edgy and different. And of course, most importantly, a lot of Melanie's fans are terrible, and she kind of seems like a bad person as well. So yeah, stay away from this album. I hope the Melanie fans don't find this. Please Melanie fans, don't send me death threats, I'm begging. It's kind of just a very of the time pop album that gets lost in its influences rather than creating an album that feels unique to Rebecca Black. This was my first time listening to a Yeet album, and while it's not perfect, it's pretty solid. It's got some bangers. It does have a handful of forgettable tracks where the energy kind of fizzles out due to a lack of instrumental progression, but overall, like I said, it's one of the more vibrant and creative Rage albums I've heard. I'm still not a big fan of Daniel Caesar's kind of nondescript writing, but this is definitely an improvement over Case Study 1 in terms of vocal performances and production. I hope that NF stops making music. God, that was cringe. That was really cringe. While I do appreciate the production and commitment to the concept of this album, Clipping's music still comes across as a little too gimmicky for me to fully enjoy. Yeah, this is one of the weaker post-punk albums I've heard. The grooves are kind of non-existent, the vocals are often a non-factor, and the soundscape of the project comes across as soulless and bland. I get that the point of the project is to feel cold, distant, and lonely, but I don't think the band is really pushing it far enough on this album. It could sound a lot more cold, distant, and lonely than it actually does. Why is this album even a thing? Like, who's asking for a Ray Sremmurd album in 2023? The production on this is either painfully awkward or just sounds like they found a YouTube type beat in 5 minutes and used that. The performances are extremely low effort. It also has a contender for worst song of the year with Not So Bad, in parentheses, Lean's Gone Cold. It's laughably terrible, and it has one of the most poorly integrated samples I've ever heard. It's hilarious, but it's bad. If you're gonna check out this album, listen to that song. It's special. This is Bon Iver's most adventurous album that unfortunately kind of lacks instrumental restraint. The more stripped back instrumental approach of this album really allows for Davis's talent to shine through. As you can see, I listened to quite a bit of jazz this month. I'm trying to get more into it, but unfortunately this one is one of the more kind of disappointing jazz albums that I've heard. It's definitely the most like over the top, goofy, and kind of cartoonish Pharoah Sanders album that I've heard. There's occasionally some moments where it feels like classic Pharoah Sanders, but for the most part, the focus is shifted away from his talent and his playing and more towards kind of group vocal chants that often are a little bit corny, a little bit cringy. Overall, this thing's not terrible. It's just one of the more underwhelming jazz albums I've heard. This is a great example of how hip-hop can still be hard-hitting and meaningful without slapping double entendres and metaphors on every single bar. Conway's energy on this album is unfiltered, raw, and real, which makes for an insanely personal kind of dive into his psyche. This is definitely Redvale's strongest group of tracks so far. He still kind of underwhelms me as a rapper, and man, his singing is not good on this album, but the production does feel more unique on this project, and the mixing definitely has improved as well. Alright, I know Fantano gave this a pretty high score, which is why I checked it out, because I'm a Fantano clone, yes, but I didn't love this as much as he did. She does kind of display a lot of potential on this debut. The writing is really unique and definitely the highlight of the album. A lot of songs cover love, but more so kind of a rejection of love and a sense of not wanting to give her love to these people that keep coming to her for that love. I just said love like 20,000 times. Overall, it kind of just highlights in a unique way how love can be tiring, which I think is really interesting. The album also does a great job of placing emphasis on patience, which makes the climactic moments that much more impactful. My issues with this album do come from the vocals. I feel like she does have a powerful and kind of strong presence to her voice, as well as undoubtedly an impressive vocal range, but the vocals can often kind of just feel a little bit dull, flat, and even the vocal runs can feel a little bit careless and messy. So overall, I feel like the vocals really hinder this project. If she can work on that and improve that, I think she can release a really spectacular album in the future. This album has a really interesting way of blending kind of childlike innocence with really harsh and kind of horrific imagery as well. I mean, you take a look at the front cover, it kind of gives this haunted mansion type feel, this kind of Halloween horror movie type feel, but then the first track on the album is called SpongeBob. Overall, the kind of brooding, horrific, and vulnerable writing from Billy Woods paired with the cerebral, textured, and off-kilter production from Kenny Segal makes for a really unique experience. This is the first time we have a artist request showing up in one of these videos. This is Paint the World Blue by TURQUOISEDEATH. Overall, it's a great mix of intricate grooves and kind of euphoric synth-driven beauty. I'm not super well versed when it comes to this genre, but I think it's a cool introduction to the genre, to the scene. And finally, the last album here. Of course, the last album is the one I usually say by the title. I'm not going to try and say it. It's an album by Sheena Ringo. It's extremely eclectic, diverse, and unpredictable, and it finds a way to incorporate this wide variety of styles while rarely feeling disjointed. All right, there you go. That's all the music I listened to in April. I guess we'll go through the top 5 and the bottom 5. The top 5, number 1, we had Deaf Dumb Blind by Pharoah Sanders. Number 2, Benji by Sun Kill Moon. God Don't Make Mistakes by Conway the Machine at 3. Karma by Pharoah Sanders at 4. And Ichiko Aoba's live album at number 5. Bunch of great albums that I listened to this year or this month. Not the year, this month. And then the bottom 5, we have the worst album, Hope by NF. Portals by Melanie Martinez at 2, Sremm for Life by Sremmurd at 3, Endless Summer Vacation by Miley Cyrus at 4, and Cigarettes After Sex self-titled at 5. So yeah, that is going to do it for this video. That is every single album that I listened to in April. Pretty good month. A little bit of a slower month for me. Just a little bit of a transitional period of my life, so I didn't have as much time to listen to new music, but still happy with what I got to listen to. And yeah, these are honestly these are the most fun I have making videos. Like, I've been feeling a little bit, there's been a lack of motivation to do reaction videos, but I feel like these monthly recaps are really fun. So I look forward to it every end of the month. So yeah, hopefully you guys are enjoying this series. I'm going to try and keep it going through the summer months. And yeah, leave your thoughts down below. Leave a like if you want, subscribe if you want. Go join the Patreon for uncut reactions. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.